Mr. Timmons, for 5
Thank you,
minutes.
Madam Chair. It seems we're here today to try to find culpability in the events that transpired last month. I seem to spend a lot of my time thinking about capital requirements and the time it takes to execute these trades. So I'm going to focus my questions there. Mr. Tenev, you have repeatedly invoked capital requirements that both your company and your clearinghouse are required to abide by in order to explain the restriction of trading last month. My friend and colleague, Mr. Barr, asked you about this earlier, but I would like to hone in on this a little bit. Could you explain what specifically about the nature or volume of the trades being ordered by your customers caused these increased capital requirements to be triggered? And how did the level of collateral required compare to what you would normally have to abide by?
Thank you for that question, Congressman. So to give you a sense for the increase, our capital requirements, our deposit requirements with NSCC from January 25th to January 28th, so a span of 3 days, increased tenfold.
What is the most your capital requirements had been prior to this event?
I believe there was a table, Congressman, that I provided in my written testimony that had the precise value at risk and special charges in the prior days. Happy to refer
but obviously
to that.
It never been close to this amount, and now you have additional capital that you've raised, and so this should not happen again. Again, I think you referenced 1 in 3.5 million was the likelihood of this situation occurring. Is that correct?
That's correct, and that's not a Robinhood number. That's actually a third-party industry number.
Are you aware of the origin of these capital requirements?
I do believe that these capital requirements, and specifically the NSCC deposit, was spelled out in Dodd-Frank.
So the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act is arguably to blame for what happened. You would not have halted trading in this case, but for this exorbitant capital requirement that you were unable to meet. So I think that when we're searching for culpability, we need to realize that the well-intentioned legislation from over 10 years ago is somewhat culpable in this entire conversation. Ms. Schultz, will you elaborate on that? Do you agree that Dodd-Frank is somewhat responsible for the situation that Robinhood found themselves in?
I think the capital requirements in Dodd-Frank can be seen as responsible. I think it's incumbent on us to evaluate those capital requirements and whether they are appropriate given the business models at issue. I think that's also a question of settlement times and modernizing our system. But I agree that the capital requirements here put into place are one of the reasons that we're having these conversations today.
And you went to the next place I wanted to go, which is the time it takes to settle these transactions. So, 12 years ago, 10, 11 years ago, we never really considered the whole concept of a Robinhood, of an app-based trade platform that democratizes access to purchasing and selling publicly traded companies. So I do think that needs to be revisited, especially because it is unfair. There are other companies that have far more resources that are not in the situation, and those companies have larger investors. So we really are picking on the little guy in this entire conversation. So between reconsidering capital requirements for retail investor platforms, number one, and number two, trying to find a way to settle these transactions faster, those two things seem to be the best way to achieve our objective of making sure this doesn't happen again. I do hope that we can hear from Michael Bodson from the DTCC in the next hearing, or perhaps someone from the NSC. I'm hearing something strange on my computer. I'm sorry, 1 second. Thank you. I'll end with this. One of my colleagues across the aisle said the deck is stacked against the little guy, and I couldn't agree more. But in this case, the very committee that is conducting this hearing has more culpability, I would say, than any of the witnesses that we have brought before us today. So we need to make sure this doesn't happen again. I look forward to working with my colleagues across the aisle. With that, I yield back. Thank you.
Time has expired. At the request of one of our witnesses, we will take a short recess. The committee stands